Hello and welcome. So I am currently doing intros with a lot of my rats, so I don't have a lot going on right now. I figured now would be a good time to do a video about the dwarfs. Look at them. I have them out over here because currently my intro group is over there and I didn't want to sit in front of them and get them all excited and stuff. So I have the dwarves out. They'll either stay on me the whole time or this will be complete chaos and there's no in between. So anywho, I get a lot of questions about dwarfs and I get a lot of people who are curious about the differences. So we're just going to do a quick video about that. They're gonna stay on me the whole time, I think. Anywho, so let's start with the differences between dwarf rats and standard rats. So the main thing is, yes, they are smaller. So dwarf rats will tend to be a lot smaller. A lot of people will say half to a third the size of a standard rat. I don't really feel like that's a good indicator of their size necessarily, considering standard rats can be quite large. So like the average size for a female standard rats is 250 grams to 450 grams, but they can be larger or smaller. And then with male rats, the average size is 450 grams to 650 grams. And again, they can be smaller or larger. So like half the size of a 650 gram rat, even if he's a male, that doesn't make him a dwarf, that just makes him small. So, the typical or average size of dwarf rats seems to be anywhere from 80 grams to like 180. Again, they can be smaller, they can be larger, but that does seem to be the typical, what you see the size of dwarfs typically being. Now, dwarf rats are not horribly common, so there's not like a ton of info on like how small and how big they can get. Junie here is 150 grams and Joja is about 180 grams. So unlike with standard size rats, dwarf rats, the females do tend to be a little bit larger than the males. Oh, I'm also going to be talking about US lines, not UK lines. Dwarf rats are in the UK, but they're still fairly new to the breeding hobby and entering into like the pet trade. So like, I'm talking about US lines where they're a little bit more common. And Canada, because Canada has a lot of dwarf rats because there is a prominent dwarf breeder in Canada. So, hi. Hello, my love, my darling. Anywho, so the best way to tell them apart isn't necessarily size, because again, you can have a small standard rat. That doesn't necessarily make them a dwarf. So the best way to tell them apart is their proportions. So they tend to have smaller feet, they tend to have shorter, thinner tails, and larger eyes. So if she'll let me, we have Junie here. I don't know how well you can see her, but her eyes are quite large. If you see her tail, it's quite thin and small. I call it a spaghetti tail. And then her back feet, in proportion to her body, are also smaller. My apologies, my love. And unlike a lot of other animals that have dwarfism, dwarf rats tend to be healthier than standard size rats because standard size rats are plagued with tumors, whereas dwarf rats do not tend to get them very often. They can get them, but it is more of a uncommon, leaning toward rare occurrence. It is more common in females still than males because that's just how it goes with rats. They do, however, seem to be more prone to something called a Zimbal's gland tumor, which is a tumor that appears right back here by the ears. It's along the jawline and it's very aggressive, and unfortunately there is no cure for it. So the only option is to monitor, do palliative care, and eventually put to sleep because it is such an aggressive tumor. Let's see if Jojo wants to run around. I don't want them on my bed often. Oh, look at that. Oh, yeah. Oh, is that interesting? Am I gonna lose you immediately? I probably shouldn't have done that. So another difference is dwarf rats tend to have a lot of energy. A lot more energy than standard size rats. They both males and females, and they have a lot more agility. They're also pretty athletic. Let's see if Junimo wants to run around. Now, one thing I will say is they do tend to be a little bit more cautious at first, but they're also fearless. So because they're so little, they too tend to want to know what's going on. She just licked my toe. They too tend to want to know what's going on before they enter into a new situation, but also they will run boldly forward with no fear. And because of that, you do want to be cautious when you first get your dwarves. You want to keep them in a more controlled environment until you're used to their speed and their size, because it can be more difficult to control them and contain them, and you don't want to lose your dwarfs. Especially if you get them as babies, because babies can be very, very small. I think Junimo was like 60 grams when I got her, and she was 12 weeks old. Which brings me to the next point, which is they tend to grow a little bit slower than standard size rats. My friend Ashley, who has an Instagram called Dazzling Rats, she has male dwarfs, and she says their coats don't start to look good until like around 6 months old, whereas with standard size rats, it tends to happen a lot sooner. So like their coat really starts to develop a lot better around like 4 months old. And the average lifespan of a dwarf is a lot longer than the average lifespan of a standard. So it is not uncommon for dwarf rats to reach 3 because they are less prone to things like tumors and things like organ failure because they're smaller, and it just puts less pressure on the organs. Did I lose Junimo? Junie? Oh, she's right behind me. Okay. I knew putting them on the bed was a bad thing. Hey, baby. Oh, I'm gonna regret this. Don't go under my pillows. Here. Oh. Now, I haven't noticed any real difference between the affection I get from my dwarf rats from my standard rats. Some people say that their dwarf rats just aren't very interested in them, but mine, when they're not exploring, are obsessed with me. They love to give me kisses. They love to climb on me. They love attention. They're very, very sweet. They like to play. They're just really great rats. And some of that is going to be line dependent, because if you get rats from a line that's very independent, chances are even the dwarfs will be that way. But they do tend to, in my opinion, seem very interested in their humans because we're just big jungle gyms to them. And that's and that's fun. That's a good thing. And again, there doesn't seem to be much of a difference in that between males and females. There's a lot less differences between male and female dwarf than standard size males and females. Junie, we're not doing that. But they do range in size, so like a quick comparison, let's see if they can, whoop. So like these are sisters from the same litter, and you can see Joja is quite larger than Junimo. So those are just some of the differences between standards and dwarfs. So let's get into some of the questions I get, which is, starting with, will I put my dwarfs with my standard size rats? Now, there is a difference in opinion between the UK and the US. In the UK, it is considered not acceptable to put dwarfs with standards, whereas in the US and Canada, it is considered to be fine. Just proceed with caution because dwarfs are so little. Are you gonna bite my toes? I am personally not going to put my dwarfs with my standards because I've had a lot of really spicy standard rats. And while dwarfs do tend to be quicker and more agile, me keeping females are way more agile than males. And I don't actually think my dwarfs would be able to get away if I had a female that was determined to grab them, because female rats do tend to be a lot faster than male rats. And I am not comfortable risking them getting injured just to have one combined group. I do see it working out a lot for other people, so I'm not completely opposed to it for other people. I'm just opposed to it for me. I'm not mixing my dwarfs and my standards. And part of that is because dwarf rats are also prone to obesity, and they need a lot less food than standard size rats. So I feed my dwarf girls about half of what I feed my standard girls. Oh, that scared them, and now they're hiding behind me. It's okay. Here. They can hide in my shirt till they get brave again. Okay. Anyway, I feed my dwarfs about half of what I feed my standard size rats. And so it can be pretty hard to make sure everyone's getting the correct amount of food if they're all living in the same cage. And it can be hard to make sure that no one's stealing extra food because, again, some of my standard size rats are very, very greedy. The dwarfs less so. They're very easily distracted. They have a lot of energy. They're very curious about a lot of things. I think my standard size could just like take too much food and then they wouldn't get some. Or alternatively, it could be the opposite and the dwarfs could steal all the food and we don't need them having too many treats because we don't want them to get chunky. So for safety reasons and just logical reasons, I choose to keep my dwarfs separate from my standard rats. But again, I do see plenty of other people who could combine their groups and there is no issues with them. So just proceed with caution, decide what you want to do. Decide what you want to do based on your rat's personalities and just keep a close eye on them. Another question. Hi. Another question I get is if I like the dwarfs, and I do. I love them. They aren't that different from standard size rats in my opinion. Health-wise, they are. At least they should be. I'm hoping that these guys will live as long as my spayed females have because my spayed females tend to live a lot longer than my unspayed females. So I'm hoping that these guys have about that same average lifespan without having to be spayed. The biggest difference in personality is how reactive they are. So like, as you just heard, someone's tail hit the bars over there. They both hid behind me because it scared them and now they're in my shirt because they're not sure about coming out. But they are still very bold, brave girls. They just react a lot faster and a lot harder than standard size rats. So like for females as well, a fun thing with that is if they go into heat, you know immediately, you try to pet them and they just have all the heat reactions instantaneously and it's so funny, honestly, it's hilarious. Yeah, hi baby. But as you can see, they're still super affectionate, they're still super sweet, they're so kissy. My dwarfs, I love, like, my dwarfs are so interested in me. They are constantly wanting attention. Jojo will sit on the door hammock and just stare at me intensely out whenever she's awake because this is what she wants. Another question I get is sizing requirements for like cages. Some people keep their dwarfs in like a lot smaller cages. Like I saw someone who said they keep their dwarfs only in the Preview 528, which is what these guys were in when I first got them. And I don't really think it's necessary to keep them in a smaller cage. Like I wouldn't put these two in a double critter nation just because I'd worry about them being able to find their food. But they're very confident rats and I do actually feel like they would do well in a double critter nation if not for that aspect. I think they would utilize the whole cage. So like they're currently in a single story and like I don't really have problems finding them because again they're very interested in me. They come straight to the door. They utilize the whole cage. They have a 12-inch wheel in there. You don't need a 16-inch for these guys. A 12-inch will do. They run on the wheel. They nest a little bit. These guys aren't too into nesting, but like they're very brave girls and like they have a ton of confidence. So they're perfectly fine in a larger cage in my opinion. I would say you could fit more rats in the cage. So like in a single story, I feel like I'd be comfortable with 6 dwarfs in a single story and that wouldn't be a problem. In a double, I'd say, I personally would go to 9. I'm a little hesitant to go more than 9, but I think I've seen like up to 10 or 11 and it was okay. Because they are a lot smaller and they just produce less waste. Hey, hello. So for another question is diet. I feed them the same diet I feed my standards. In the UK, dwarfs are fed a different diet than standard rats. I think it's less protein, but I'm not sure. But that is UK standards. In the US and Canada, it is perfectly fine to feed them the exact same food that you feed your standards, and I do, and I haven't noticed any difference. So they are on the Sheenamite diet, just like the rest of my rats. They get fresh food daily, just like the rest of my rats. They just get less of it. And as I said, they get about half of what my other rats get. And finally, am I getting more dwarfs? This is the question I probably get asked the most. And the answer is yes, I am absolutely getting more dwarfs. Dwarfs. I love them. I want a dwarf group. I think that would be a lot of fun watching them run around in double critter nation. Oh my god, Junie's bathing behind me. She's just like a little egg. She's like this big, just bathing behind me. It's so cute. Anyway, I have plans to get some more dwarfs very soon. Hopefully it pans out. Those would be older dwarfs. Not old, just older than babies, essentially. My two girls are going to be 1 year old next month, so it's October currently. They're going to be 1 in November. And I had hoped to have more babies before then, but that's just not how it panned out. But I'm planning on getting some adult dwarfs, hopefully soon, hopefully. And then I have plans to also get babies next year from a breeder that's nearby. And I'll talk all about that more when we're closer to the time of it actually happening, because right now everything's up in the air and I don't know for sure what's going to be happening. But yeah, those are my plans. These are my dwarf girls. Aren't they so sweet? Look at her. I love them so much. Oh, you guys are so much. Yeah. Alright, so, big sneezes. Big sneeze. Alright, so, that was it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. All the fun stuff down below. And we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye!